You're standing in the middle of a crowded room, drowning, and no one knows. You need help. You desperately need help. But when someone asks if you're okay, you smile and say you're fine. Or maybe you're struggling with something at work, something that would take someone else 5 minutes to explain, but you've been wrestling with it alone for hours because asking feels impossible. The words are right there in your throat, but they won't come out. Or perhaps you're carrying something so heavy it's breaking you, and people around you have offered to help. They've actually offered. But you said no thank you, I've got it, even as your knees were buckling. You'd rather collapse under the weight than admit you can't carry it alone. You're not proud. You're not trying to be a hero. And you're definitely not the only person who feels like asking for help is the same as admitting defeat. If this is you, I need you to hear something. You're not stubborn. You're not too independent. And you're not broken. What you're experiencing has roots that go deeper than you might realize, and understanding where this comes from might finally help you stop carrying everything alone. Let me explain what's really happening when you can't bring yourself to ask for help. The first thing you need to understand is that for you, asking for help doesn't feel like a simple request. It feels like exposure, like you're pulling back a curtain and showing everyone the parts of yourself you've worked so hard to keep hidden. The parts that struggle, the parts that don't have it all together, the parts that are human. Most people see asking for help as a practical exchange. I need something, you have it, can you share it? But you see it as a confession, an admission that you're not capable, not strong enough, not smart enough to figure it out on your own. In your mind, needing help isn't a temporary situation. It's evidence of a permanent flaw, and you'd rather suffer in silence than let anyone see that flaw. Here's what makes it even more complicated. You're not afraid of people saying no. You're afraid of people saying yes. Because if they say yes, if they actually help you, now you owe them something. Now there's a debt you're not sure you can repay. Now the balance has shifted, and you're no longer standing on equal ground. You've learned somewhere along the way that accepting help means accepting inferiority, that needing someone makes you less than them, that dependence is weakness. So you've turned self-reliance into a shield, and asking for help feels like lowering that shield and standing defenseless in front of people who might hurt you. And there's something else happening beneath the surface. When you struggle to ask for help, it's often because you don't believe you're worth helping. Not in a dramatic, self-pitying way. It's quieter than that. It's the belief that your problems aren't important enough to burden someone else with. That other people have real struggles, and yours are just inconveniences you should be able to handle. You've spent so long minimizing your own needs that now when you actually need something, your brain tells you it's not a big enough deal to bother anyone. So you wait. You wait until you're drowning. You wait until it's a crisis. And even then, even when you're going under, you'll still hesitate because you've convinced yourself that everyone else's time, everyone else's energy, everyone else's attention is more valuable than your need for support. If you're recognizing yourself in this, take a second and hit that like button. Not for me, but because acknowledging this pattern is the first step toward understanding why you do it. And if this is making you feel a little less alone, a little less like something's fundamentally wrong with you, subscribe. Because you deserve to keep hearing that you're not broken. Let me tell you something about people who can't ask for help. You're almost always the person everyone else comes to. You're the one who shows up when others need you. The one who listens, who supports, who carries other people's burdens without hesitation. You've built an entire identity around being the strong one, the capable one, the one who doesn't need anything from anyone. And that identity has served you. It's kept you safe. It's kept you valuable. It's kept people from seeing the scared, uncertain person underneath who's terrified that if they stop being useful, they'll stop being loved. But here's what that identity costs you. You've turned relationships into transactions where you can only give, never receive. Where you can only be the helper, never the one who needs help. And over time, that imbalance doesn't make you feel strong. It makes you feel desperately, crushingly alone. Because real connection isn't one-sided. Real intimacy requires vulnerability. And vulnerability requires admitting that sometimes you need people just as much as they need you. Think about the last time someone asked you for help. You probably didn't judge them. You probably didn't think less of them. You probably felt honored that they trusted you enough to ask. But when you imagine asking for help yourself, you assume everyone will judge you the way you judge yourself. You assume they'll see your request as weakness, as burden, as proof that you're not as capable as you pretend to be. You're holding yourself to standards you'd never hold anyone else to, and that double standard is slowly crushing you under its weight. Here's where it gets really interesting. The people who struggle most with asking for help are often the ones who needed it most desperately as children and didn't get it. Maybe you asked for help once, and you were told to figure it out yourself. Maybe you showed vulnerability, and it was used against you. Maybe you watched the adults around you struggle in silence, and you learned that asking for help was shameful, that suffering alone was noble, that needing people made you a burden. So you taught yourself to be small, to need nothing, to handle everything on your own. And that skill, that painful, lonely skill, has followed you into adulthood where it no longer protects you. It isolates you. Before we go further, I want you to do something. Scroll down to the comments. You'll see people writing things like, "I felt this in my soul," and "How did you describe me so perfectly?" You're not alone in this. And if you're ready, leave a comment. Even if it's just "This is me." Because when you name this struggle, you're telling someone else out there that they're not the only one either. Your words might be exactly what someone needs to feel less broken today. Let me tell you what happens when this goes on for years. It stops being just a behavior and becomes your entire sense of self. You start saying things like, "I'm just independent," or "I don't like relying on people," as if it's a personality trait you were born with. But you weren't born this way. You learned this. You learned that asking for help led to disappointment, rejection, or shame. You learned that people weren't safe, that vulnerability wasn't worth the risk, that the only person you could truly count on was yourself. And for a while, that belief kept you from getting hurt. But now it's keeping you from getting close to anyone. Think of yourself like a tree that grew up in a storm. You had to develop deep roots and a strong trunk just to survive the wind. And you did survive. You became strong. But now the storm is over, and you're still bracing yourself against wind that isn't blowing anymore. You're still in survival mode in a situation that no longer requires it. The armor you built to protect yourself has become so heavy you can barely move under its weight. And here's what your inability to ask for help is really telling you. It's not saying you're strong and independent. It's saying you're scared. Scared that if people see you struggling, they'll realize you're not as put together as you seem. Scared that if you admit you need something, people will use that need against you. Scared that if you stop being useful, people will stop caring. You've confused self-reliance with self-protection, and in protecting yourself from disappointment, you've also protected yourself from connection. But let me tell you what asking for help actually means. It doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. It doesn't mean you're incapable. It means you recognize that some things are easier, better, or more possible when you don't do them alone. And it doesn't mean you're a burden. It means you trust someone enough to let them see you clearly, and you respect them enough to believe they can handle what you're carrying. The people who love you, truly love you, they're not waiting for you to be perfect. They're waiting for you to be real. They're waiting for you to let them in. Every time you refuse help, every time you say, "I'm fine," when you're falling apart, every time you carry something alone that you could share, you're not protecting them from your burden. You're protecting yourself from the terrifying possibility that they might actually want to help, that they might actually care, that your need might not be the deal breaker you've convinced yourself it is. You struggle to ask for help because somewhere deep down, you believe that your worth is measured by how little you need from others. That love is something you earn by being low maintenance, by being strong, by never asking for anything. But that's not love. That's performance. And you're so tired of performing. Here's the truth underneath all of this. You're not afraid of asking for help. You're afraid of what it means about you if you need it. You're afraid that needing help confirms every terrible thing you've ever believed about yourself, that you're not enough, that you're too much, that you're fundamentally unworthy of care unless you're completely self-sufficient. But those beliefs were never true. They were just stories you told yourself to make sense of times when you needed people, and they weren't there. They were survival strategies for a childhood or a past that required them. But you don't live there anymore. The weight you're carrying alone, it's not making you stronger. It's making you lonelier. And the people around you who care about you, they're not impressed by how much you can handle on your own. They're heartbroken watching you struggle when they're right there, ready and willing to help, if only you'd let them. So if you're someone who would rather break than bend, who would rather collapse than ask for support, who carries everything alone because you've convinced yourself that's what strength looks like, I want you to know this. You're not too independent. You're not too proud. You're just someone who learned that asking for help was dangerous, and you've been protecting yourself ever since. And maybe, just maybe, asking for help will get easier when you stop seeing it as weakness and start seeing it as trust. When you stop believing that needing people makes you less and start understanding that it makes you human. You don't need to fix this. You just need to understand it. And maybe with time, you'll learn that the strongest thing you can do isn't carrying everything alone. It's trusting someone enough to help you carry it. That letting people in isn't weakness. It's courage. And that being loved doesn't require you to need nothing. It requires you to trust that your needs, messy and inconvenient and human as they are not the burden you've convinced yourself they are. You are not too much. You are not a burden. You are worthy of help, not because you've earned it, but because you exist. And that's always been enough. Now, if this video helped you see yourself more clearly, if it made you feel understood instead of judged, I need you to do something. Hit that subscribe button, because you deserve to keep hearing messages that help you understand why you are the way you are. Leave a comment below, even if it's just a few words about your experience. Your story matters, and sharing it might help someone else feel less alone. Smash that like button if this resonated with you. And if you know someone who carries everything on their own, someone who never asks for anything, someone who needs to hear this, share this video with them. Not because they need to be fixed, but because they deserve to feel understood. You showing up here, trying to make sense of yourself, that's brave. And I'll keep making videos to help you do exactly that.